Hi guys, this is your lecture for October 28th, and we're going to be continuing chapter 10, and we're actually finishing it today. We're going to be covering pages 107 through 109. Okay, so we're going to start off talking about sauces and gravies. So what is a sauce? Well, a sauce is a flavorful liquid that can be used in a variety of ways. So for instance, a sauce is used when we make barbecue chicken. You're going to put barbecue sauce on the chicken. But a sauce can also be a chocolate sauce, and you can use that to drizzle on top of a very delicious looking dessert, as you see here. So sauces can be combined, and they can be combined with pretty much any kind of food. I mean, if you think about macaroni and cheese, there's a cheese sauce that goes in there. So just about any kind of food. So when you are thinking about making a sauce, you're not going to want your sauce to be too thin. You're going to want to have a nice thick sauce, thick enough so that it can actually stick to the food and not just run off. So there's several methods that we can use to thicken a sauce. The first is starch. The second is emulsification, and the third is reduction. So with starch, they're very easy to use. You can use cornstarch as a starch. Flour also counts as a starch. But with cornstarch, you're going to have a different effect than with flour. So with cornstarch, it's going to thicken your sauce and give it a more transparent appearance. So for instance, you would use this to thicken fruit sauces. Flour, you would have a more opaque look to it, so it's slightly thicker. But for both of these starches, it's really important to remember that you don't want your starches to lump when you're mixing it with the sauce, because one of the good characteristics of a good sauce is that it's smooth looking. So in order to avoid lumping corn with the gravy or the sauce or whatever it is that you're using, you're going to want to first mix cornstarch with some cold liquid such as milk or water, and then you stir constantly while adding it to whatever you're adding it to, and that's also true of flour. So what about emulsification? Well, emulsification is essentially the suspension of one liquid in another. So a good example of that would be hollandaise sauce, and it's just a good example of the process of using emulsification to thicken a sauce. One of the commonly used ingredients to create emulsion is egg yolk. A reduction sauce is a sauce that it becomes thicker because you cook the sauce, and as you cook it, the sauce evaporates, and that results in the thickening of the sauce. Okay, so let's talk about white sauce. White sauce is a category of sauce, and it's any sauce that's made by adding milk and seasoning to a cooking roux. And a roux is made by cooking equal parts of fat and flour. White sauce is very versatile. There is, for example, the thin white sauce, which is commonly used as a base for cream soups. There's medium white sauce, which is used as a base in casseroles. There's thick white sauce, which is used in soufflés. So you can see it's very versatile, and it has lots of different ways that it can be used in cooking. And white sauce can also be flavored with other ingredients. So for instance, you can add cheese to it. That would be something that would make a very delicious sauce. Okay, so let's talk about gravy. Gravy is typically made by thickening the juices of cooked meat or poultry. And there is a variety of gravies. There's creamy milk-based gravy, there's brown gravy, there's giblet gravy. All of these all count as gravies. And the most foolproof way to make gravy is to start with a roux. And gravy actually usually thickens if it sits for a long period of time. I'm sure you might have noticed this at some Thanksgiving dinner if you were paying attention to the gravy dish. But you can thin gravy, and to do that, you just add a little bit of hot water or broth or milk. It depends on what kind of gravy you are working with. But You definitely are going to want to take the gravy when you're thinning it and warm it over low heat, and then add the hot water or the broth or the milk. And then you're going to heat thoroughly, and this helps thin it. And that's also the same method that you would use to reheat gravies. Okay, so what makes a good gravy? Well, it needs to be smooth, like I mentioned earlier. For the sauces, gravy needs to be smooth. There needs to be no lumps in it. Obviously, sometimes there might be like pieces of chicken in it, or turkey or something, or beef, but we're talking about like no lumps made from the flour or whatever is part of the gravy. You're also going to want it to have a glossy appearance, and gravy also thickens as it cooks, and also, as I mentioned earlier, it thickens as it cools. So those are good characteristics that you want your gravy to have if you make gravy. So gravy should be thin enough to pour, but thick enough to adhere to food. And when you're making gravy, you need to be very careful and follow gravy recipes very closely because of the fact that there's a proper temperature or length of cooking. There's certain techniques that you want to use when you're making gravy, and if you don't follow the recipes closely enough, you can wind up with a disaster. And we don't want that, particularly if you're making a gravy for Thanksgiving dinner or something like that. But that is basically that for gravy, and that's also the end of the chapter. So what I want you to do is to please open up your book to page 109 and complete the section review on page 109. And this section review covers the whole chapter. Please let me know if you need help or have any questions. Thank you.